You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is... Well, thanks for joining me today here in the Storycraft Cafe and the Author Stories Podcast. We have the distinct honor today of being joined by Fiona Barton. She has an amazing new book. It's called Local Gone Missing. And I'll tell you what, Fiona, I've been thinking a lot about how to kind of start this conversation. But I love the book so much because it's such a breath of fresh air, because it's a callback to mystery stories that I have loved for so long. Today's the in vogue thing are the super fast paced thrillers that drop you into the story and they kind of go at breakneck speed and characters are all over the place. And this is a different kind of story. And that is not to say that thrillers are better or worse, or mysteries are better, or it's just different. It's just different. And I love it. I love it. I love that we have choice in stories. And so anyway, welcome to the show. It's good to see you today.
Yeah, it's really good to see you too. Yeah, you're absolutely right though. What the joy of reading is that choice that, we can find all sorts of thrillers, mysteries, suspense in amongst. And that's, the joy of reading for me, discovering new things.
Absolutely. So Fiona, I've been thinking about some questions lately that are great conversation starters. And I love this one because people have really connected with it. But is there a piece of writing advice that you have gotten, either super good and something that really meant the world to you and you've held on to and cling to throughout your writing career, or maybe it's a terrible piece of advice that you look back on and think, oh, mercy, I'm so glad I didn't take that advice, or maybe you did and, have an experience from it. Is there anything like that sticks out to you?
Oh, goodness. I got quite a lot of advice.
As most of us do.
Yeah, we do. But I think because I had written the book before anyone else knew that I was writing, even my husband wasn't aware to begin with. So I just set off on my own. But there were loads of bits of advice, which, don't give up your day job. Nobody makes a living from writing, and sort of trying to manage expectations. But, people would say, only write what you know. And you think, well, yeah, I get that. I get that, if you know a world, like, the world of journalism that I used in the first three books, it was great for me to use that because it felt like I was coming home. But actually, the whole thing about writing is that you can imagine, you can research, sure, but also you can just put yourself out there and sit in somebody else's shoes and see things from another perspective. So I didn't follow any advice really.
That advice about only writing what you know, that's great until you're a fantasy author or a science fiction author that's writing about the 30th century. Or
I'm not sure Terry Pratchett ever wrote what he knew.
Exactly. Or a mystery writer who's writing about criminals and things that have gone horribly wrong. Very few of us know the ins and outs of cracking a real life mystery. I think we would like to think that we are, but we don't have a lot of experience most of the time. No. But yeah, that is, you're absolutely right. That's not very good advice. Write what you can imagine. That's a better piece of advice.
Write what inspires you. That's the thing, isn't it? It's you've got an idea and you think, I'd love to look into that. maybe, it's a world that you don't know about, but you can always find out. You can always, write round things and find people who do know about it. I talk to, people about real life situations all the time to make sure that I get as much right as I can.
Right, exactly. Fiona, the new book, Local Gone Missing. How many books is this for you now?
That's my fourth book. I started late, third career, and I'm writing the fifth one at the moment. So yeah.
Well, I love that you started late, as you say, because that allowed you to gather up some life experience. And this is not to say that people can't write an amazing novel when they're 18, 19, 20, but there is something to be said about writing from the perspective of some life experience, of meeting lots of varied characters and living through some things. Do you ever think about you getting into publishing when you did, as opposed to what kind of novel that you might have written at 25? Do you ever think about that?
No, to be honest, I don't, because at 25, I was a journalist. I was a reporter, a news reporter. And so I was writing every day, other people's words, but was writing every day. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a gap in my life. I loved reading, still do. It's my passion. But no, I can't imagine what I would have written at 25. And it was only really, later on that I had the space to do it. When I stopped being a reporter, a journalist, that I thought, I've got, I'd like to look at this story. I couldn't just stop dead.
Right.
So, that's when I started doing it. I love that writing is one of the things that people can do at any age. You can be 80, you can be 17. If you've got a story to tell, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's wonderful, isn't it?
Right. I've met quite a number of novelists who began their careers as journalists or reporters, and I'm fascinated by the toolkit that you acquire by doing that job as a journalist or reporter. Because especially if you live in a larger city where there might be multiple news outlets, when a big news story happens, a big happening, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different people that show up to report on that event. And all of the facts are the same, but each of the reporters or journalists see it from their perspective and they report on it a little differently. You'll get a little different details depending on whose eyes the story has come through. Do you draw on that toolkit, so to speak, that you acquired as a journalist? Do you ever think about that?
Yes, absolutely. Every day. I mean, sometimes there are 100 reporters on a story if it's a big one, with news crews and print and online and you're right. But that's the different outlets will be looking for a different angle so that people will turn to them to read it or hear it. You're always looking for a different way in, is what we say. Often, as you say, the facts are the same, right, but you may have found a witness or somebody who was involved, and you can tell it from their perspective. And I love doing that. I really love it. The thing is, I mean, when you're a reporter, every story is different, and every day in a week can be different. And so you get all those different voices. You write it, you tell their story, you move on. But all those voices are still there, ricocheting around my head. Whole interviews are so memorable to me, and so I've had this brilliant cast of characters to draw on, and I'm very grateful for that.
I love that. Speaking of the cast of characters to draw from, when you first think of a story, and I'm obsessed with where stories begin, and this has been an obsession of mine for years. And I hear as many answers to this question as there are people, and everyone is different. And I'm just fascinated that there's no single way that stories come to be. And I like to describe it like this: that at one moment, a story like Local Gone Missing doesn't exist in any form or fashion. It just doesn't exist. And then either a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or and then you're like, who is this and what are they about? Or maybe you have read or watched a news article on TV or in the newspaper, as if newspapers exist anymore. And then you start playing the what if game in your mind, and then you start casting that story that's beginning, with these people that don't exist, and then all of a sudden they do exist, and Local Gone Missing in some form or fashion is a thing now. And then as the writer, your job is to dig it out and excavate it and dust it off and polish it up, and then there's a whole book there. It's magic. It's just magic. But what is that first moment of inspiration like for you?
As you say, it just takes so many forms. Sometimes it's a conversation that you hear, strangers on a train. You could be sitting in the seat behind and you hear a conversation and you think, I wonder what's happened there. I wonder what he knows, and you can play games with yourself on long journeys. I think with Local Gone Missing, it was a mishmash of things, because I'd got in my head, there's a quote, isn't there, that I think it might be Tolstoy, actually, somebody terribly wonderful writer, saying there are only two plots: the hero's journey or a stranger comes to town.
Right.
I have it on my wall, in fact. But so I had an experience where I was in a bar. It was an event abroad ages ago, and this guy was stood at the bar, and no one I knew, and he was telling the other people standing around him about his many very important contacts, friends, things he knew,
sure,
and including some royal contacts. And the thing he didn't know was that I used to report on royal news, and I knew he was a fake. I knew it. I mean, he was getting it wrong. And it lasted minutes, and I think we kind of caught each other's eye, and I think he realised that she knows.
Right.
And
the
so
jig
he
is
moved
up.
himself, off he went. But it was afterwards I sat there thinking, this is somebody who has reinvented himself completely.
Right.
So what does that feel like? The danger of meeting someone like me while you're, being this new person, and what might you do to protect that story? So that kind of started me thinking about, a stranger, somebody coming into a new group of people and faking it, and the danger of being found out. So that kind of started, the cogs turning.
Right.
And I was looking for a new main character, because my journalist, Kate Waters, she'd had a bit of a rough ride in the Sussex. I thought she needed to have a lie down. So I was looking at doing something different, and I wanted to write about a woman who has sort of come to a moment in her life where everything is turned upside down for various reasons. So I chose to write a policewoman, a detective, murder detective, who is recovering from breast cancer that sort of came out of the blue, and her relationship has gone wrong. Everything has kind of imploded, and she's wondering whether she can ever be the detective that she was. So I had the little, people who fake things, what is that like? What's it like waking up every morning and thinking to yourself, okay, so I'm so and so, and I've done this and I've done that, reminding yourself,
Right.
living that other life, and a detective who is very unsure of her future. So I kind of married them together. And it developed from there. I mean, it's, that's not the whole story, but it's,
Right.
But that's how it started. Yeah.
So when you first developed the character of Elise,
Yeah.
were there things that you did to kind of get inside her head? Because the character that you've written previously was a journalist, and you had some insight into kind of how to build that character. Because in a lot of ways, while she might not have been based on you, she was definitely informed by experiences that you have had. As far as I know, you've never served as a police detective.
No.
So what did you do to get inside her head? And by the way, I just have to say this, that I love the way that the extra steps that you took to humanize her. Not that we like to see anyone going through hardships, and especially cancer and physical hardships like that, but there is something deeper that comes with that character, because you took extra steps to humanize her, to show us a character that is in one sense the long arm of the law, but is also a frail human with her own insecurities and all that at the same time. And that's a tightrope that's difficult to walk sometimes.
Yeah, you could say that. Yes, I did make it easy for myself. So I was starting out with a whole new cast of characters, but I've worked with police during my years as a journalist.
Sure.
So I have worked with quite a few, but also I looked and I found two really interesting women who are senior detectives and have breast cancer, and they've started a charity.
Oh, wow.
So I talked to them about what it is like, and they absolutely informed Elise. The fears that people won't take you seriously, that they'll always see you as a sick person. How do you go back to work? All of those things. So I did do research, but and also just as a woman. The whole relationship thing, we've all been there. So yeah, I did use, stuff that I imagined and that I researched, and kind of, wriggled it all together, like you do. But thank you very much for saying that I humanized her, because that's what I like to read.
Right.
I like characters who've got, light and shade, and they're not just working machines.
Right.
I like those too. There are brilliant thrillers where, you're driven through by the detective. But I'm more interested in the people.
Yeah.
What makes people tick. That's what I like, really.
Certain writers that I've met, when they start developing a character, will go through all of these different exercises to get to know the character before they start writing. Maybe they'll create character sheets, and they come up with different characteristics and different things that make them individual people. I'm at a blank for words for whatever reason.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
And they'll go through all sorts of exercises to learn the character. Then other writers, and I'm a little bit like this, that I like to start writing and kind of discover who the character is while writing a scene. How would this person react to this? And that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
that's what I do.
Do a bit of pre-writing. So, is that the camp that you kind of fall in?
It is. I do. It's terrible, because you get sort of 2/3 of the way through and you think, oh, I wonder how tall she is. It's ridiculous. And
that's what second drafts are for.
It was important, actually, how tall she was. But no, I don't do big character biogs. I don't, because, as you say, things develop. And so you don't always need to know how many GCSEs they got, or, you know, what size shoe she takes. You don't always need to know that until later, when, you know, there's a remark by somebody about, you know, how did you do at school? So I like to be a bit looser about them. Of course, at the end, you've then got to go back and make sure you haven't made terrible errors by saying she was blonde in one bit and dark haired in another.
Right.
But I don't have photographs that I look at. Some people like to, you know, have a face that they can look at. I don't. And I think when I did my first book, one of the remarks that came back was, I've no idea what Jean looks like. And so I went back and because I knew, in my head I knew,
Sure.
but I hadn't written it. So I had to go back and fill in some of that so that the reader would know what my vision of her was.
I've met some people that will cast a book that they're writing with actors that they want to kind of use as touchstones or whatever. And invariably, if I do that and I use Brad Pitt as a character, then then I start thinking about characters that I've seen Brad Pitt play, and I just start writing that character instead of who this made up character is. And I think if you're able to do that and separate those, then God love you. That's amazing. I can't do that.
I can't do that either. No, I mean, an actor brings so much baggage with them. I know that they can play, you know, 100 different characters, but
there's one that sticks with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So no, I don't do that.
In Local Gone Missing, there's another great character, Dee Eastwood. Where did Dee come from, and what does she bring to this story?
Well, Dee's the cleaner, and so the book is about insiders and outsiders. So it's about people, blow-ins, people who arrive in Ebbing, this fictional seaside resort, and the people who live there all the time. And Dee, so Elise is actually an outsider. She's just moved in, so she's seeing things from an outsider's perspective, whereas Dee is very much an insider. She's new to the fairly new to the town, but she knows everybody's business. She's seen it all. She's seen what medicines you're taking
in a way that only a person who cleans up after other people can. It was so uncanny the way that you brought that light and shade to that character. It was amazing when you start thinking about, oh my goodness, there are people that we choose to ignore who know everything, and it's a little scary.
It is a little scary when you think, when you think about it, but it's that invisibility that she has, because although you know there's a cleaner in the house, you can hear her hoovering and things, she doesn't really exist, but she knows so much. I mean, you know, all the letters that you've left out, you know, the phone call she's overheard, all of those things. And I loved that there was somebody who could give a different perspective to what Elise is seeing and what other characters are seeing. Dee is in there and she knows, but she doesn't tell. That's part of being a good cleaner, is that you don't tell. So she and the reader are kind of complicit in that. But I wanted to give the reader a different perspective on what was happening behind closed doors. And she was perfect for that.
Yes, she was. We started our conversation talking about the difference in a direction that a lot of modern novels are taking with the kind of breakneck thriller, and things are happening, you know, a million things a second, and the reader is being misdirected here and there, and you know, you're just worn out at the end of the novel. And I do love some of those. But you can't just read that all the time. You know, your adrenaline just stays, you know, peaked, and you know, you have burnout at some point. As opposed to this novel that's more of a classic detective slow burn. Does character inform how the story unfolds? I'm trying to find a good way to ask this, but does the types of characters that you come up with, do they determine the pace of the story and kind of whether this is the frenetic pace versus a more smoldering kind of plot, if that makes any sense at all?
It does, absolutely. Yeah, it does. The sort of characters that I've written, they're not breakneck speed characters. So I've got Elise, who's a bit frail. I've got Ronnie, the next door neighbour, who's, the amateur nosy Parker. I've got Dee. There are no car chases. That isn't what I write, really, because I like to unfold things. I like things to, unfold naturally rather than, and that isn't how I write. Other people do it brilliantly.
Right.
But it's just not what I'm interested in as a writer, I think. I'd much rather, have a bit of a pause while people are looking into things and, and things are occurring to them. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. That's the kind of writer I am, I think.
I love the way that you put that you allow the reader to take a pause, ponder on things, and let realization come to them. Because the problem with some of the more breakneck speed thrillers is, if not done exceptionally well, kind of can insult the reader's intelligence in a lot of ways, because you're just fooling them at every turn, and aha, you thought it was this, but it's really this, and and you can only write Gone Girl so many times before it becomes cliche, and some people continue to take that genre and push the boundaries and do amazing things with it, and some people don't, and we'll just put it at that. What do you feel about your relationship with the reader, and the way that you're telling the story? And do you envision that the reader is having an aha moment at certain points, and do you set up certain things and reveals and scenes to knowing that the reader is gonna take a moment and go, oh, I get it now? That's
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it sounds slightly cynical, doesn't it? But yes,
not really.
There are moments where I get an aha moment. I'll be writing and I'll think, oh, right, that's what happened. So yeah, they happen to me, and I enjoy reading them. But yeah, I think people got a bit enmeshed in the twist. There was a whole genre where it was the twist and you had to have one, and
right.
But it's a bit exhausting, isn't it?
It is.
It was for me anyway. But no, I do set things up once it's occurred to me, because it's fun to do that sometimes, to say and then this happened, and and people say, oh, right, okay, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that's nice. I enjoy that. That is fun. But yeah, there's not a huge, complete volte face where everything you thought you knew is turned upside down. No, I prefer things to, as I say, unfold. Unfold is more my style rather than twist, and
yeah.
Each to their own, I think.
Absolutely, and there's plenty for everyone to read, no matter what your taste is, and that's
absolutely. Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. With Local Gone Missing being your fourth book to publish, and you are currently writing your fifth, I think you said.
Yes.
Has your writing process changed from that first novel to where you are now writing your fifth novel?
Each one has been so different, really. The first one, no one knew I was writing, so I just, pootled along, and did a bit here, did a bit there, put it in a drawer. Second book, I rushed to write because I was terrified. You think, I'm never going to be able to do this, and there was a deadline from the get-go and all that. And so in the second book, I learned that writing is not just putting fingers on a keyboard. You are allowed to think as well. And so I learned a big lesson from that. I rewrote the second 40,000 words of that book. The third book, I really enjoyed writing. And then I went and spoiled it all by hating all the characters. So I've got really comfortable with the characters that I was using. I loved Kate. I loved Bob Sparks. But it was right to try something different. So yeah, the Local Gone Missing was hard. Yeah, it was hard because I had to create this whole world from scratch. So the fifth book I'm enjoying more because, you know, I've drawn the map.
Oh, I
I've
love
drawn
it.
the map of Ebbing. I know Ebbing, and I know Elise, and you know, so I can enjoy other bits of the writing. So I would say my writing process has kind of lurched left and right.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody ever finds it easy, do they? Do you find it easy? How many books have you done?
Yeah, it never gets easy. You know,
No,
after three or four novels,
it's Mount Everest every time, isn't it?
you know what's interesting is that you go through the whole process of finishing a book and then publishing, and then when the next one comes along, every single person is faced with the blank page, and it levels the playing field for everybody. Everybody starts with nothing, and it's a gift, really. Yeah.
J.K. Rowling had mapped out all 6 of Harry Potter books. Was it 6?
Yeah.
She had mapped out all of them, but no, I haven't done that. I haven't done that. No.
We talk about world building, especially in science fiction and fantasy, where we're talking about creating all new worlds. But when you're writing mysteries, and especially with a fictional place like you've developed, world building is a term that we can use. I think that's safe to say, because it's a new place, it's new characters, there are new rules to this society, if you will. When you're writing a series and you begin on book 2, is it easier because of the work that you did in book 1, or does the established world and the rules and the characters, does that box you in? Do you ever think of it in terms like that?
Yeah, I do. Because the first one, you've kind of laid out the ground,
right,
and you've got different characters that you've put in that you will want to use again, and that's great. Except when you come back to it, you think, oh God, you know, she's not old enough to have done this. So you are boxed in because you've created that world, and so you can't just suddenly say, oh well, never mind, we'll make him 10 years older. It's got to work. So yeah, I hadn't created a world before, because before, place actually wasn't a character, I don't think, in the first 3, but this time it is Ebbing. And I didn't want to make it a real place because I think that boxes you in even further.
Sure.
You know, there's no wriggle room there. And also people then think they're in the book. So I'd heard from a friend who did that, and it was a bit of a nightmare. So I invented it, which was a lot of work, because there's a lot to a town, a lot.
Yeah.
You think of the high street and all the rest of it, but so I did box myself in a bit on certain characters, but the great thing about it was that I had this place, and I know it. I can walk down the street in it, and I know who I'm going to see, and what sort of people are in which shop, and you know, that's a great help. Help.
I love it. How long do you see this series going, or do you have an ultimate goal for it, or are you just enjoying the ride as long as these characters are willing to go with you?
Yeah, or enjoying the ride, definitely. I don't know. I'm contracted to write book 5 and 6 for the American publisher for Berkeley. I'll see, you know, how I feel. about it, I may, do something completely different again. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, I love it. Local Gone Missing is on sale June 14th here in the States. And I love it. Go visit your local bookstore and support local books, or grab it on Amazon. How do you feel about your books being translated into audiobook? Audio is a huge growth market right now, and people are loving, being able to pop in their earbuds and join a book when they're, standing in line somewhere or whatever. Do you listen to your audiobooks? It's a little weird sometimes to listen to your own book, but what do you think about it?
Well, they've been done brilliantly. I'm thrilled with them, but it is weird. The first one, The Widow, I knew Jean's voice. I could hear her in my head all the way through writing it. And then suddenly an actress was speaking her. And that was really, oh, that's not Jean. But it was. She did it brilliantly. I just had to kind of, hand her over.
Yeah.
Because the reader would have a different voice. Every single reader would hear her differently when they're reading the book. But no, I like the audiobooks very much. It's very accessible. And it's huge here as well, the market. That's what people are doing. Rather than e-readers, in fact, it's audiobooks. And I listen to them all the time.
I do too. Fiona, we wish you much success on the new book launch, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.